talk, fired up and loud. The Wolfpack Nation, we're a hell of a crowd. From the first pitch to the final play, Tuffy talk, let's roll today.
Wolfpack Nation, welcome back into another edition of Tuffy Talk Live. Ethan Berry alongside Mr. Leg, Greg the Leg. Greg, how are you today?
Good, man. I'm excited. We're going to talk some baseball, I think, right?
We are going to talk some baseball, and this was originally going to be a Patreon, but I think, Greg, we used our common sense and said, we try and keep the Patreon. I try and keep the Patreon to 20 minutes. And I said, there's no way that Greg and I are going to talk baseball in 20 minutes. And this was an episode that I don't like. It's not something we had been planning on or anything, but Chris Hart
kind of fell off our laps.
Yeah. Chris Hart talked to the media last week, and I was really excited by what I heard, and I know you were as well. And so we figured we'd get on here and kind of react to it. So this isn't like an emergency podcast. He talked a couple of days ago, but it's more of like an urgent, maybe. Is that an accurate description, Greg?
Well, yeah, I think we had the ability to digest what was put out there or consumed, as we like to talk about, in content, and we kind of had some time to think about it, and now we want to express how we thought about it. And I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised by our reactions. At least yours, because you sometimes get a negative connotation unfairly, but I think they're going to be happy with how this thing turns out.
Yeah, and just before we really get into it, we don't know how long this is going to go, right? Like, so there is a possibility that we split this into two parts, and potentially put the second part on Patreon. So we'll play it by ear and see how that goes. So if you're like, man, the discussion got cut off halfway through, that's probably what happened. So be sure to check out on the Patreon.
By the way, that Patreon is only $5 a month, right? So it's good value. Yeah. We're just trying to grow the brand a little bit so we can give you guys even more content.
All right, Greg, let's hop right into it. So, I mean, look, I don't know what your kind of thought process was on this. I know for me, I had been waiting for Chris Hart to talk to the media. I expected there to be a press conference, kind of after the season ended in June. And that never happened. And so, month goes on, a couple months, and you start talking to people like, man, is this going to happen? Like you want to hear what he has to say. And feels like there's questions that need to be asked, as you would any, new coach. Mm-hmm. And so finally I think it was done very quietly, but obviously there was a good group there. Hart spoke to the media, I believe it was Thursday afternoon, and touched on a number of topics. I know the stuff I was most interested in, what's going to be different from Elliott Avent, his path to get here, kind of his approach in the portal, things like that. What was one thing, Greg, that stood out to you, or question that was asked that you were really most looking forward to, where you said, hey, I really want to know what Chris Hart has to say about X?
Yeah, for me, it was really recruiting, right? I mean, we all know that he was basically the recruiting coordinator, but he still had a boss to answer to. So he still had to kind of go after what that boss was looking for, as in Coach Avent. So was his recruiting philosophy going to pretty much stay on par or stay on course with how it's been done? Or is he going to look at it a little differently? And then how was he going to work with different position groups, if you will? Those were the two things that I was most curious about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought he did a good job, covering those things and addressing it. For me, it was, what's going to be different from Elliott Avent, right? Because to me, that's kind of the $1 million question is, what Elliott Avent. I mean, we've been watching Elliott Avent baseball for 30 years, right? And
your entire lifetime.
My entire life. Yeah. we don't know any different, we don't know. I have these expectations. Like, I know, okay, this is going to happen because this is the way it's always been done. And so what's going to be different? And his answer to me really, really stood out. And I'm going to
before you get there, let me ask you a question. Before you get there, let me ask you a question. When you say what was going to be different, were you looking for more of an in-game thing, off-field, a little bit of everything? Like, kind of what were your thoughts with
Well,
regard when you make that statement?
mostly in game, and I think, correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong, but I think off the field, I think Chris Hart does most of the work, did most of the work.
Hmm.
Not that Avent wasn't involved, but I think Hart really had the keys to the program, so to speak.
I agree.
Now I
Yeah, I
think
agree.
in game, I don't think that was the case. I think
Hmm.
Avent was, I don't want to call it a dictatorship, but I think he was the one calling the shots. At least that's my
Yeah.
kind of impression. I don't know. Do you disagree with that? Like, do you think?
No, I think he managed everything, and I hate the word micromanage or
Yeah,
those type of negative connotations, but I think he had a philosophy, and sometimes you just got to take it and own it and run with it. Now, it did sound like Chris um, was running offense, but again, like how much is that dictated from Avent and so on and so forth.
right.
But yeah, no, I'm with you there.
And those two guys have been together for so long.
22
Avent
years.
can, yeah, right. Avent can call for a bunt in this perfect situation. He probably doesn't even need to call for it anymore. Chris Hart just knows, hey, this is the spot where Avent's going to want to bunt. So for me to answer your question, yeah, I thought, okay, it's mostly going to be in-game stuff that would change, right? Maybe like some lineup stuff, some how do we approach pitchers. I would say
How do we build
probably
our
the
roster? Yeah,
how do you build the roster? I
yeah.
thought, one of the first thing that comes to mind is pulling pitchers, right? And the game of baseball has evolved to, you pull pitchers proactively. You pull pitchers before they get into trouble. Starters go 5 innings. You don't let them go through the lineup the third time. Different variations of that, right? Obviously, not every situation is exactly the same.
Right.
So, to be honest, that's kind of one of the easiest. Easiest isn't the right word, but like one of the most obvious, I
It
think,
jumps off of the
possibilities.
page. Yeah.
Yeah, it jumps off the page. Yeah, more aggressive on the bases, things like that. But
Mhm.
anyway, Chris Hart's answer had nothing to do with that, and I thought it was a great answer. And basically, and again, this isn't word for word, but he basically said he came from Florida State, where you kind of take for granted that you're going to Omaha, right? He said it was an automatic expectation that we would host a regional and go to Omaha. And that was his mindset. He brought that here to raise the bar for players. And he said, hey, getting to a regional is hard, right? It's not easy. I think it's kind of the one sport where like qualifying for the tournament is actually still hard. And obviously getting to Omaha is hard, but the focus when he was at Florida State was getting to Omaha. That was it. And then he told a story about Texas beating them, and
Texas.
yeah, and they didn't even celebrate. They just shook hands and said, "We expect to go to Omaha." And I think they won. I don't know if they ended up winning the national championship
They
or
did.
whatever. They did win the national championship that year. So
Yeah.
I thought that was a great answer from Hart, where it wasn't really something that you think about, like. And again, it's hard to differentiate this from Avent and be like, well, Avent X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't want it to be like that. But I there were at times I think a sense where you just kind of felt like State was just kind of happy to get in. And it was like, okay, we made it in, and now let's see what happens. To me, Chris Hart kind of said no. Like, we're expecting to get in. We're expecting to host a regional every year, right? And he talks about, okay, if we're going to aim for a national championship, we can fall short and still have a really good season, right? And but if your goal is to win the national championship, that's the goal. And I think that was Elliott Avent's goal too.
No
But
doubt.
I don't know. I just that answer really stood out to me. And again, he was asked, what are you going to do differently? He very easily could have said, well, Avent run a great program. Avent ran a great program. Like, we've been doing, he's done a great job, and we're just trying to keep things on the right path. But I thought he went out of his way to say, we are going to raise expectations. That was kind of my takeaway from that.
No, I agree. And it's again unfairly when you have a head coach there for 30 years, it's really hard to say something new, right? And I think when you get Chris Hart coming in there, it's a fresh perspective. It's probably nothing different than what Ellie even said, but again, it's just coming from a different voice, and so it feels
Mhm.
different, right? Whether or not it does or doesn't, time will tell. But I think that it does get people rejuvenated, riled up, fired up, whatever you want to say, and be like, okay, like welcome Chris Hart. Welcome to the Chris Hart era.
Right. Yeah, and again, Avent's goal was to win a national championship as well. He
Absolutely.
mentioned that many times, almost to the detriment of other things, right? You go back to
Hmm.
2025 when State had an opportunity to win the ACC, and Elliott Avent was just like, "We care about getting to
Yeah.
Omaha. That was what we care
Yeah.
about."
Yeah.
And so
And I think
I don't
I
know.
think to that point, yeah, to that point though, I think you should have multiple goals, right? And so
Right.
for him to kind of dismiss the ACC as that we have loftier goals, sure, that's fine, but
Mhm.
like don't be
It's
disingenuous
still an
when you say
accomplishment. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely it is, right? Because when you
Yeah.
look back at the season, only one team can hoist the trophy in Omaha, right? But again, to what Chris Hart is saying, like, hey, you can make it or not make it to Omaha and still have a quote unquote successful season. And in point, that would be one of those things, right? Winning the ACC regular season, winning the ACC tournament, hosting a regional, whatever those goals are.
Mhm.
It's you can still check those boxes.
Let me make a comparison for you. Elliott Avent
Sure.
versus Westmore. Who do you think is more highly regarded?
It's probably Westmore.
I think so
Um,
too.
and it's and again, what are you valuing, right? Because again, if we're calling Omaha essentially the Final Four, which it's quite not quite, but
Close
it's
enough. Yeah.
basically it's close enough, right? Avent went to 3. We've only West has only gone to what, 1?
He's only been the one. But
Yeah.
I think what
It
here's kind of my point is I think Wes is valued more highly because of the other stuff he's won. They won 3
right, the
ACC
ACCs.
titles
Mhm.
in a row. They
Coaches of the year, like
coaches of the year, but even like team accomplishments, like they've won the
mhm,
ACC regular season I think twice.
I think so.
They've been to a couple of Elite Eights where they have come up short. They've been to the Sweet 16. And to where, with Elliott Avent, it's like, okay, he went to Omaha 3 times, which for you and I, that's awesome.
That's
But other
great.
people
Yeah.
look at it and say it's like, well,
He's not won a championship, quote,
hasn't won a
unquote.
championship, right? And so I think, to be honest, as a college sports fan, that's one of the things that I love. It's like, okay, yeah, only one out of 300 plus teams is going to lift the trophy every year, and it's incredibly unrealistic to expect that. But you have all these opportunities. You have a conference tournament you can win. You have a conference regular season you can win. You can get to Omaha. You can get to a Final Four. You can do all these other things. You can go on, right? You can make the Elite Eight. You can make the Sweet 16, and that's still considered an accomplishment. You compare that to pro sports, and it's like, again, as a Celtics guy, as a Red Sox guy, either we win the title or we don't.
Yeah,
Like there's
yeah,
no you go to the TD Garden in Boston. There's no conference championship banners hanging there. They only for winning a title. And so, I think that's the great thing about the college athletics. And so we'll see. Back to Chris Hart. Does Chris Hart kind of focus on that? But that was kind of the impression I got, that it's like, hey, we're going to raise the expectations, and you know, uh, part of it too is winning the ACC regular season, winning the ACC term title. That helps you. That puts you in better position for the postseason. I've made this argument many times going back to last year. Your only chance to host last year was to win the ACC regular season. That was your only chance.
yeah,
And
agreed.
you host, you have a better chance to get to Omaha. And
Yeah.
so that was one of the things that really kind of stuck with me after those quotes from Avon. But anyway, long-winded thing to say. I really like where Chris Hart is kind of setting the expectations here.
Yeah, agreed. Again, it just feels different, right? Again, it may or may not be the same things that Elliott Avent was saying, but because it's coming from a new voice, um, it hits a little different, and it does. I think it does rejuvenate. Like I hope it rejuvenates. And this is really like we said we weren't going to be negative, but I do feel like people were kind of souring on Elliott Avent because he had been there for so long, and now that you have a new voice, a new sheriff, maybe people will start coming out, right, to more games and doing that. And maybe, because you've seen you've seen resurgences at Carolina, as much as I hate to say that, Georgia Tech, where you've seen coaching changes and then like something just flips and
Mhm.
now it's a whole different perspective. And again, it's always going to be, we've talked about this before, baseball is always going to be third or fourth fiddle behind the main sports. Maybe your goal is to get it to third, and really
I
compete
think
with
at NC
women's
State, it's
basketball.
always going to be fourth,
I
in my
do too,
opinion.
unless
Yeah.
unless something just dramatically changes. I mean, heck, Reynolds is bigger than the Doak, right? So
Mhm.
it's, even just from getting
Yep.
bodies into games, it's just got to hit a little different. But with that being said, I'm hoping people will, take notice and be like, huh, okay, maybe we need to go check out a ball game or two.
Yeah. He talked a little bit about style of play, and this was another answer that I liked offensively.
Mhm.
Um, Adapting to your personnel, looking
Mhm.
to hit for power, and uh, um, being able to run. Right? Like, to me, that was
Please.
something that, yeah. Well, when you look at this roster that they've built for 2026, we've talked about it. You don't have a bunch of guys that are going to mash 20 home runs, and he was asked
At least
about
not
it.
right now. Yeah.
Not right now. Yeah. And he was asked about it, and he basically said, "We want a balance, right? We want, you can't have a bunch of stiffs." He didn't say stiffs. I'm saying stiffs
Yeah.
who
But
only
you
who
can't you
only hit home runs but can't
and
defend
can't
and
play
can't
defense.
run,
Yep.
right? But at the same
Yep.
time, you can't have a bunch of little guys who can only, uh,
Field and get on
field and
base.
run but can't hit for power,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
what do you take away from that? And as we get ready to look into next season and look at the offense, what do you kind of expect from this group that they've put together?
Yeah, I don't know if balance is the right word yet. Like, again, and coach mentioned this, like, the team did take a couple of flyers on some guys, we'll talk about them, probably not in this podcast, but he took guys that had potential high ceiling, right? And he mentioned Mikey Ryan, kind of some comps from Mikey Ryan last year, where the potential was there, but he just hasn't put it together on a college field. Um, and so look, if those things pan out, you look like a genius. But if they don't, then you start questioning, evaluation of talent and coaching that talent and so on and so forth. So I think you have to strike a balance, right? And especially in today's age with NIL, mashers and high end ball players are going to cost money. And if you're not going to give your coach the resources, then you're going to have to do some of these creative things. And I think we've seen this with Chris Hart, right? We've seen his evaluation of talent, the guys that he's brought in over the years and that he's developed. And I don't think that's going to change with him just being the head coach. Like, will he dedicate more, like as much time as he's doing now with that, or last season? No, I don't think so. I think that's the reason why he brought in um, the coach
Taylor
from
Black.
Taylor Black, thank you. I knew Taylor, I just couldn't get his last name out of my head, thanks. But that's why he brings in a Taylor Black, to do some of those things, and again, we'll talk about some of those sounds like some of those responsibilities that these coaches will have. Um, so yeah, I like it, and the fact that to be able to adapt on the run, right? Because again, we talked about those in-game adjustments. Like if you're facing a one of those Carolina pitchers that are really good, or Nat coming back from Clemson and they're pitching really good. This might be a 1, 2, 3 run kind of game. So like maybe you do have to, I hate to say it, Ethan, bunt with your number 3 hitter or whatever.
Mhm.
But again, I think he's gonna have an eye for those things.
Yeah. Yeah, what stood out to me too there was, uh, playing to your personnel,
Hmm.
right? And I think that was something that we didn't really see either of the last 2 years, where felt like you needed to run more with Ty Head, with Luke Nixon, with Rhett Johnson and
Brett
Mikey
Johnson.
Ryan this year. Yeah, Sherman Johnson. Like,
Hmm.
and they just didn't. And so being able to say, okay, hey, we don't have as much power as we would like, right? We would love to have a couple of 15 home run guys, but we don't. And so now as a result, okay, Rhett Johnson, go steal 30 bags for us. And we're not going to be intimidated by UNC's throwing game or
Right.
Auburn's throwing game and say, well, we can't run. They're too good. You're good too. You're good
Push the
too. Rhett,
envelope.
Rhett Johnson is still fast.
Yeah.
Right. So
It's
that
it's
was
crazy though.
something that I liked.
So and we'll just let's because Rhett was brought up in the press conference. So since he
Hmm.
was brought up, this is a good kind of opportunity to kind of maybe segue a little bit. Rhett was 7 of 9 for the USA baseball team this summer. 7 of 9. He only had 14 stolen bases in the entire NC State baseball season. Like, and we talked about it during the regular season. Like, that's criminal. like you've got, and that's just Rhett Johnson. You already mentioned the other guys that had the ability to steal, and I just don't think that we took advantage of some of the things that we were better on paper, especially when you play teams like Duke, who couldn't throw out the slowest person in the world, like my grandmother on a walker. They weren't throwing them out. So again, I'm these are some of the things that I'm hoping will change, and that we're not just getting quote unquote coach speak. That
Mhm.
the video will match the audio. But again, that excites me. Again, as a fan, that like it looks like he's noticed some things that we could have maybe done better. Because I'm sure you'll talk about it, like the building of the roster. Like he put an emphasis really much. Sorry, that was a horrible English.
Really
He
much.
put a real big emphasis on pitching, right? Because again, he saw
Mhm.
kind of how that season unraveled when you lost, your two dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought too, kind of, speaking of philosophy, he was asked, what is your philosophy? How is it different from Avent? Kind of another question of like, what are you
Yeah.
going to change? And I thought it was interesting. Like, again, not that he was throwing or saying anything bad about Elliott Avent, but he says, from a baseball and strategy standpoint, I carry a lot of what Coach Martin taught at Florida State. And he references the other Florida State alums who are head coaches. Link Jarrett, obviously, Mike Bell at Pitt, and then James Ramsey at Georgia Tech. And then he talks about the culture, that's influenced by Avent. And, how can you mesh those two together? But, emphasizing, hey, from a baseball perspective, Coach Martin, this is what he said. Coach Martin focused strictly on on-field coaching without much team bonding, whereas Avent was the exact opposite. Planning to mesh those two styles. And again, not that a big reason for our success under Elliott was that he let us coach the baseball side while he built a culture where pros cared about NC State. The baseball
Yep.
instruction will stay consistent.
And I've talked to a lot of the ball players. I mean, you know that, right? And one of the things that I've heard time and time again was culture. Like culture was a big reason why those guys. And again, you still have to have talent, right? Like I'm not saying that okay, if you have 30 culture dudes, you're going to make the College World Series. No, but like guys truly cared for one another. They would pick one another up if someone was having a bad day or whatever. There's like the bonds on road trips, and you saw it last year when they came up to DC and did their activities up here, and they're just trying to again going to Hawaii, going to Puerto Rico. Those things are bonding trips. They're early in the season, and I know sometimes we gave Avent crap because the schedule sucked, but there was more than just playing ball games there, and
Yeah.
that I got that so many times from different ball players. So
Yeah.
it's glad to hear that Hart's going to kind of continue those types of things.
And that's awesome, right? It's an important part of not only, as you said, the team bonding, but also the experience of a college athlete, right? Like it is more than just the 55 games you play during a season. And so I think that's important. At the same time, as a fan, like I can't help but sit here as a fan, right? Like I'm not anything else, and
Sure,
say like feel like not that hurts you, but like it feels like we can be doing
you can still do it
other
and play
things.
better competition or whatever.
Well,
Like
playing better competition. I wasn't so much focused on the schedule, but more of just like I thought there were things that state should have been doing better,
mhm.
and more so kind of the stuff we've talked about is playing to your strengths as a team, making the right decisions on the mound, right? And so I was encouraged to hear that. I was encouraged to say, hey, like from a strategic perspective, let's look at Florida State, right? And not that Florida State's perfect, right? They've made it to Omaha conservatively like a million times and never won somehow.
I think 25
Um,
times.
oh, I was thinking it was in the 30s, but yeah, whatever. I mean, it's
Yeah,
unbelievable that they've never won,
yeah, it's
but
crazy.
but again, like, and you look at those coaches that have all done very well. I mean, Link Jarrett has been unbelievable. And he was unbelievable at Notre Dame of all places.
Yeah,
Notre Dame.
yeah, yeah.
James Ramsey comes into Georgia Tech and in year one completely flips them. And Mike Bell, look, Pittsburgh, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and be like, "Oh, Pittsburgh, look at Pittsburgh."
No, but
He's got them performing
he's
relative to where you expect Pittsburgh to be.
he's
And
got the
so
worst resources there. Like they literally
got
have a
the worst
scoreboard that doesn't work.
resources. Right.
I'm not even kidding. Like
Yeah,
it didn't have
and
light bulbs.
so
Like
and they've been on the periphery. You know, remember this year people
Mhm,
were saying, "Oh, they should be in the
mhm,
tournament over NC State." Well,
mhm.
he's had them on the periphery, and again, like relative to expectations, I think he's had them doing very well there. And so,
Yep.
you know, can Chris Hart get into that mix? We've mentioned UNC, where Scott Forbes took them from feel like they had kind of plateaued with Mike Fox to, or now Scott Forbes has the. I mean, look,
One game away. Yeah.
I know we all hate
Yep.
UNC,
Yep.
but
Yep.
like that has been a very, very well-oiled machine the
Mhm.
last 3-4
5
years
years. Yeah.
since Scott Forbes took over. And if NC
Yep.
State could get to that level of consistency, where I think they've been a top 8 seed the last 3 years, they've been to Omaha a couple of times. Like uh, that's the kind of position you want to be in. So, and again, Forbes is not a Florida State guy, so he doesn't apply here. But
No.
that was something that I like to hear. Was like, hey, it's not just the team camaraderie and rah rah. We're gonna play our seniors and all this other stuff. Like, there's more to it than that. And it also makes me, I don't know, like sometimes I feel bad, being critical, and I wonder if I'm being too critical. I'm sure a lot of people are like, you're too critical, but you kind of wonder, like, are other people inside the program kind of thinking the same thing? And not that Chris Hart came out and said this, but kind of feels like there probably were some disagreements, not disagreements, I guess, with
Yeah, there's always gonna be
Avent's approach,
disagreements.
and right, exactly, and things that you would like to do differently. And I don't know, like for me, I'm encouraged that maybe we will end up seeing some of those adjustments we want to see.
Yeah, and I think disagreements are okay. Like, I honestly, if
Yeah.
I was the boss, I wouldn't want to be surrounded by yes men. Like, I wanna be challenged a little bit, but, with respect. And so, yeah, we will never know how that got, especially over the last couple of years. But again, like, Avent made 2 College World Series in those last 4 years, 5 years at State. Like,
Hmm.
it's hard to argue with those results. Now, I really do like Hart taking the best of, best in standards, best in industry. I work in IT, so that's a term that you hear a lot,
Hmm.
best in industry, the industry standards. So I do like that, right? And again, this is maybe something what state is needing, right? To kind of push them to that next level is just again a fresh set of eyes on the program. You're bringing in new coaches. You're reassigning coaches roles. Everybody kind of gets elevated. Um, and so, like, if I'm a coach on staff right now and I see Chris Hart, one that we've promoted within, that makes me feel really good about staying on staff, right? Because now I have the chance to grow within inside the program. Like, I don't have to go outside of the family to be able to move up in the ladder, because that's exactly one of the things that Chris Hart was talking about in this press conference. Is like, hey,
Hmm.
like, is there the next you on this staff? And he goes, I sure hope so. Um, and so when everybody's rowing in the same direction, you get more positive traction. And again, I'm hoping that's some of the things that we're going to see kind of develop in the next year or two.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Greg, let's hop over to the Patreon. We've got a few more things to cover. We've been going for 25-30 minutes here. So let's
Yeah.
hop over to the Patreon for part 2 of this. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, as seen below. Follow us on all of our social medias, YouTube, and then obviously the Patreon for part 2 of this, patreon.com/Tuffy Talk. So we'll see you guys over there for part 2.